Welcome back to another episode of From the Couch Sports. I am Connor and I'm your host. This is actually episode 21 of From the Couch Sports. And if you like and enjoy the content, please like and subscribe to the video. I've got a lot I want to get into. To start things off, I was planning on doing this video a little bit later tonight, expecting the Suns Mavs Game 7 to be a fun game, a close game at the minimum. I thought the Suns were going to win this. Obviously, they're not. They scored 27 points at the half. That's like majority of teams do that in each quarter. And in like at the point of making this video, it's about a 40-point game. So I don't think there's even a slim chance of the Suns coming back. It would be, if it did happen, it would be the greatest comeback in NBA history by far, because it would occur in just the fourth quarter. So I don't see that happening. So we'll just kick into things and talking about these conference finals that we've got coming up. We've wrapped up all of the Game 7s from today. To kick things off, we have the Eastern Conference Finals. This is going to be the Celtics and the Heat. So both of these teams, they went through kind of a tough journey to get here, but they also had a little bit of a luck as far as the injury bug goes. The Celtics got past the Bucks in 7 games, and the Bucks didn't have Chris Middleton at all the entire series. And so Giannis, every single game, is just playing like at his best. He's doing everything, and like looks like he's ready to die out on the court. Like, this is a guy, like, you can tell that he's tired. And I think in Game 7 it was just like the toll that it takes on your body, like not only just to normally carry a team, but normally in these positions, like Giannis doesn't play like as many minutes, and like he's not being asked to do everything, and like he still does a lot every game. Don't get me wrong, but like with Chris Middleton out, it's like those are your 20 plus points per game that are gone, and that's tough. And to see the Bucks even take it to 7, even having a 3-2 lead at one point, I think that was very impressive for them. But on the Celtics, I got to give them their props, because this Celtics team is coming into their own as well. I really think I think Jason Tatum's coming into his own. He's making that next step into a superstar caliber player. We've seen like moments from Jason Tatum throughout his career, even where it's like, look, this guy has the potential to be a top 5 player in the NBA. But this playoffs, for sure, he's kind of solidified. Like, I'm making that argument for myself based on my playoff performance. Multiple 40-point games. He, like, to start the playoffs off, he sweeps the Nets with KD and Kyrie, and then they go in. They have a tougher series against the Bucks, but they're able to get it done. And they're going to play the Heat in the next round, which I think is going to be a tough matchup. Now, I'm a Heat fan. I'm not going to lie about that. So, obviously, I'm rooting hard for Miami to win this series. But I'm also kind of scared about it, because the matchup's very good on both sides. I could think, like, the Celtics have a very good defense. So does Miami. And both of these teams are very deep as well and well coached. Honestly, if I wouldn't even be able to make a prediction right now. I really do think this is going to be a 6-7 game series. And it could go either way. Part of me feels like the Celtics are probably going to edge the Heat in this series. But either way, I think it's going to be a fun one of the better series of the playoffs. And like the Heat's journey to get here, getting past the 76ers. First couple games, Joel Embiid wasn't playing, and then he came back, and you could tell he makes such a big difference on the court. But he wasn't 100% healthy at all in this playoffs, at least in the Heat round. So they were able to get past them in 6 games, kind of blew them out the last game or so. But like looking at this matchup wise, like it's an interesting matchup. I'm curious, like, not that Kyle Lowry has been his best, but he's also been like back and forth with injuries. So I'm curious if he's going to be able to play a good portion of this series. But then you got Jimmy Butler, all the shooters that the Heat have. It's going to be a tough series for sure, but I think it's going to be a fun matchup to watch. So I'm very interested to see how this plays out. Who's going to come out of the East and reach the NBA championship. And then for the Western Conference Finals, this is the Warriors and then, of course, the Mavericks. The Warriors, they were able to get past the Grizzlies, and the Grizzlies gave a hell of a shot. Like, without Ja Morant, they gave it everything they had. They had the game where they blew the Warriors out without Ja, and then they weren't able to get enough done. And, like, I think Ja being healthy might have potentially changed the outcome of that series. But the Warriors are still a very good basketball team. And like, they're getting healthy too. Like, Steph is getting healthier. Jordan Poole's coming into his own in this playoffs. Clay's finally getting in the rhythm of things. He had a really good game 6 against the Grizzlies. So, like, that team right now, they look very dangerous. And I would not be surprised if they at least reach the finals, maybe even win it all. So we'll definitely see how that plays out. And then the Mavs, the Mavs Suns, like, I think that the Suns kind of collapsed in this series. They started off ahead 2-0. They came back to Dallas, and I remember seeing, like, after seeing the first 2 games, like, it looks like the Suns were going to make a run to win it all, potentially. Like, Chris Paul, the first 2 games was incredible. Even towards the back part of the Pelicans series, he has taken over games, winning games in the end because of Chris Paul. And then you get to the Mavs series, game 1, game 2, he does it. And then I think he turned 37, and then they go into Dallas, and Luka has a huge game, and Chris Paul just, he wasn't the same the rest of the series. I don't know if he was injured or what might have happened, but, like, he had the game where he fouled out, barely played half the game because of foul trouble. You might be able to call that, like, I know some of those calls were a little bit questionable, so let's maybe put a little bit more blame on the refs on that one. But Chris Paul also, like, he had games with tons of turnovers. Like, I think there was one point in the series where he had, like, in a 2-game stretch, he had more turnovers than he had total shots made. So it's just like, I don't understand what happened to the Suns. Like, DeAndre Ayton, I thought he was going to dominate in any of these playoff series. Like, you're going against teams that don't have elite big men, and you were the number 1 overall pick. So I feel like maybe I had too high expectations for the Suns team here. I think Devin Booker played pretty well, but even in stretches there, like, the Suns just weren't hitting. They weren't gelling together, and they were the best team in basketball this whole entire year, basically until this Mavs series. And I'm not sure exactly what happened, but the Mavs at home, they just take things over. A lot of their role players like Jalen Brunson, Dorian Finney-Smith, they're just hitting big shots. And, like, I did not expect the Mavs to make it to the Western Conference Finals. I thought this was going to be a 5-game series, maybe 6 at the best. But props to them. I do want to talk a little bit about, a little bit more about Chris Paul. And, like, to be straight up, this is from the couch sports. I sit on the couch and watch sports, so I'm not here to critique. I'm not a professional athlete, so don't hold me to that standard. But also at the same time, like, I've watched Chris Paul's entire career, and I've watched most of these guys' entire careers. Like, I've been watching basketball for 20 plus years, and so, like, I'm not here to degrade his character or anything like that. But at the end of the day, like, Chris Paul's career at this point, and he can very well change what things are now. But Chris Paul's whole career has been ridden in failing in the playoffs. And not just failing, but, like, there's been years where he got hurt, and it's just never being consistent in the playoffs. Because he'll have his moments. He'll have moments where it's like, this is Chris Paul. He's one of the best players in basketball. But then he'll have, like, multiple games where it's just, I don't know what happened there. I don't know if he was playing hurt or did he have an off night. Like, it's tough. And the thing is, Chris Paul's played for so many teams at this point, too. It's like, when every team has the same repeated issues, like, I don't know who to blame, but, like, it seems like Chris Paul's universally considered top 5 point guard in basketball history. And if you're looking at the total career accolades and stats and everything, I can totally understand making that argument. But at the same time, it also feels like Chris Paul never gets the amount of backlash that like LeBron would get for losing a finals, or Kevin Durant got for losing the series in the first round. Like Chris Paul came in on the Hornets, the New Orleans Hornets. He ended up leaving there, went to the Clippers, and he had a couple runs in the playoffs on the Hornets. But I'm not going to hold that against him because he wasn't playing for a great organization. But then he gets to the Clippers. They've got the Lob City thing going on. They had a lot of good teams there. Were never able to make it deep into the playoffs. Never make the finals with the Clippers. And then then he goes to the Rockets, and it's the same thing. Like he's in positions to win and reach the finals even, and he just can't. They can't get it done. And this is with Chris Paul and James Harden in his prime, winning MVPs and whatnot. And then obviously then at that point Chris Paul goes to the Thunder. He had a great, terrific season with the Thunder. So I'm not going to hold going deep into the playoffs with a Thunder team that probably shouldn't have made the playoffs in the first place. But then he comes to the Suns, and it's the same thing the last 2 years. You get a handful of really good games where he's taking over and winning you the ball game, and then you get a couple of those games where he's not really doing much. And whether it be an injury or turnover issues, foul trouble, like it's something that has continuously popped up within his career. And as big of a fan of Chris Paul as I am, I've watched this guy. I remember Wake Forest back in the day, like when he came out, was the top pick in the draft. Like I've watched this guy for a long time, and I'm a big fan of Chris Paul. And his career probably isn't over at this point. Had he maybe won a championship, like he could make the argument like maybe it's time for me to wrap it up. But it's not too late for Chris Paul to have those moments, but it's getting pretty close. I mean, he's 37 years old. Next year he's going to be 38, so he's getting closer to 40. He's not the athletic guy that he used to be. Those are just things that go with age. So like his window's really closing. I'm curious what this means for the Suns going forward. I know that DeAndre Ayton, I don't believe I think he's going to be a free agent. They didn't give him an extension yet. And then, Chris Paul, it's like you got some big question marks. You guys were a team that should have gone to the finals this year, and you weren't able to get it done. So I'm really curious to see how the rest of that goes out. But as far as the conference finals, I don't, outside of me wanting the Heat to win because I'm a Heat fan, I don't really have too much more, that I'm expecting. I just want to see a clean, injury-free finals. I don't want to see this finals that's dictated by refs calling a bunch of minor fouls. I want this to be good basketball, close games, and ultimately injury-free. I think that's the biggest part because any of these teams, if one player gets hurt that's a key player, then it's like the other team's got a big leg up, and you don't want to see that in basketball. But moving past the NBA, I want to recap the UFC card this weekend. So this card, when I made the last video, I talked about the main event, and then I covered a couple of the other, lesser known fights that were going to be on the card, just fights to tune in for. I didn't really cover the whole main card, and it turned out it was a pretty fun card. The main event didn't end like the way that people wanted it to. People always want to see a finish to end a fight, and unfortunately, this one didn't end like that. I thought there was a very good chance it was going to, but Jan Blachowicz and Alexander Rakic. Blachowicz, the first round, he came out and he was picking up Rakic's leg, just kicking it. And it was his lead leg, just kind of picking it apart. And then Jan is like, his punches, like he's just throwing big combos, and you can tell he's got power. He's throwing body shots, and like he had a very good first round. I definitely had given him the first round. And then Rakic kind of turned some things around in the second round, and it was a much closer round. I thought Rakic actually probably won the round. He did a lot of work on the ground in the grappling and wrestling aspect. And then going into the third round, Jan Blachowicz kind of came back out and was more so like he was in the first round. He was picking apart at the legs, and then what had happened, I think he had a leg kick, and then Rakic stepped back, not even with the leg that he had been getting compromised with with the kicks. He stepped back and something buckled in his knee. I'm hoping this wasn't a severe injury. From the reports, apparently he had injured this knee 3 weeks prior to the fight. Decided to just push through. Some of these guys are just, the willpower to fight through a severe knee injury. And by the time that the knee buckled, it was like I don't think he can do much at all. Like he fell on it, he fell down, and I was just thinking, like, did I miss a punch or something? And then you see the replay and you see the pretty bad knee injury. So I'm hoping that wasn't super severe. But nonetheless, it was a fun fight, and up to that point, Blachowicz was winning that round too. I would say, even though it was, I think it was still relatively in the beginning of the third, but he ended up winning the fight just because Rakic couldn't continue, and most likely he's going to challenge for the belt next. I know here next month we're going to see Yuri versus Glover Teixeira. And then I think the winner of that fight will fight against Blachowicz in his next fight. Because he lost the belt, he won the belt, defended the belt in a fight, and then lost the belt in his next defense. So I understand you don't give him a title shot right off of that. But also, then he goes in and he beats a contender, a guy who probably would be in position to fight for the belt had he won. So I can totally see the argument there. I'm actually interested in the 205 division. It feels like for years it wasn't the best division, but now we've got we've got a couple vets that are sticking around there that are really good, but then there's a lot of young talent as well, like Yuri, Rakic, Jamal Hill, a lot of guys like that. There's a Russian fighter, just totally spacing I'm blanking on his name at the moment. Ankalaev, another guy that's in the top of the division, and then I just think there's a lot more competition there and a lot more talent than we've seen in the past, and part of that might have been just John Jones dominating the division for so many years, but nonetheless I think it's an interesting division at the moment. And then another fight that was in 205. This is Ryan Spann and Ian Cutelaba. Ryan Spann got a quick submission finish in the first round. He looked pretty good in, even on the feet, and then he was able to get the submission pretty quickly as well. So he got a nice win there. And then this one's kind of what was probably my favorite fight in the whole card was Davy Grant, Louis Smolka. Davy Grant I've seen multiple fights of his that are just super fun to watch. His fight with Chito Vera was crazy. And he's just, in this fight, round one, he's just going crazy, like his combinations, and it seemed like someone was playing UFC and they're just button mashing, and not that he was throwing stuff he doesn't know that he's doing, but he's chopping apart Smolka's leg, his body, his head, kicks to the leg, kicks to the body, those teep kicks. He's throwing everything, punches to the body, just combinations over and over. Just threw a ton of strikes in the first round, very dominant. And then the second round came, and it looked like Davy Grant was just gassed. It looks like, just from watching it, it looks like he didn't have the energy to keep going. And I thought, maybe is Louis Smolka going to come in there and, turn things around, because the first round didn't go so good for him. But the second round comes, and Smolka lands some big shots. And then he's able to get a couple, positions on the ground where he tried to thread in some submissions. Grant was able to get out of those, but ultimately, Smolka probably won the second round of the fight. And then in the third round, Davy Grant just had his energy back. He looks a lot more like he did in the first round. He comes out there, throws a lot more kicks, and then he ends up throwing a kick. And you could tell it definitely hurt Smolka, because immediately after, Smolka shot for a takedown, and then Grant was able to finish him on the ground. He landed some strikes from on top of him, and it even looked like he got knocked out for a second. It was pretty crazy finish. I don't believe this won fight of the night, and neither of them got bonuses or anything, which I think is crazy, because this was an amazing fight. So hopefully they get taken care of on the financial side, because both of them fought a crazy good fight. That was my favorite fight of the night. But a couple other good fights that happened last night. Manuel Torres, I think this was his UFC debut. He got a knockout over Frank Camacho. And then another UFC guy his debut, Jake Hadley. He actually lost by decision to Alan Nascimento. And I didn't even realize this, but Nascimento actually trains with Charles Oliveira. And then, like, he didn't have a lot of fights in the UFC. So to be honest, like, I haven't seen too many of his fights. So I didn't, when I made the previous video, I didn't know too much about him. But since watching the fight and, hearing a little bit more about him, like, he's a legit fighter. And Jake Hadley, it was a tough decision loss, but it's also his first fight in the UFC. And he's a young guy, so I'm sure he'll bounce back. But then this was on the undercard. Michael Johnson, he got a nice finish over Alan Patrick. I think this was in the second round. But while this fight happened, it was a very fun fight as well. And then Johnson in the second round, I think it was, he landed a crazy combo, just finished him. Nice to see him get back in the win column. Tough because Alan Patrick has been on a similar losing streak. So, as much as I understand, like, you put two losing streak fighters together, it's tough because, when you're fighting for such high stakes, like you guys are fighting for your career, the opportunity to make a living in the UFC, like, and then you fight a guy who's also on a similar path trajectory to you as far as losing a couple fights in a row. And then it's just like, if you win and you beat this guy, there's a chance this guy's not in the UFC anymore. And, that's tough to see always. It was good to see Michael Johnson get a good win, though. People make jokes about it, about how, like, one fight he'll lose and then the next fight he'll look like he could beat anybody in the division. And I think that's what makes him so fun to watch. I could care less about the records. And I've talked about this before with boxing. But, like, I feel like some sports, and especially combat sports, when you're fighting people, they hold the undefeated, the whole, zero next to your wins as, like, this thing that's unacceptable to lose. And, like, for boxing, we can go down the list of great boxers of all time that have lost and overcame that. And the same goes for UFC and MMA as a sport. Like, GSP had losses. Obviously, like, John Jones, Khabib never lost. But, like, a lot of these guys have lost, and then they've came back from the loss, which makes it even more impressive. So, like, I know a lot of people that don't watch a lot of MMA would see Michael Johnson's record and think that he's not a great fighter. But, like, then if you look at the context and see some of the fights he's been in, it's like, no, he's actually a very good fighter. There's a reason he's in the UFC. He's just one of those guys that, he's going for a finish every fight. And he's been finished as well in some fights as well. So, that was a fun fight. And then Andre Petroski versus Nick Maximov. Petroski was able to take over he took the undefeated mark on Maximov's. He was able to get a submission in the first round of the fight. And that was a fun fight as well while it lasted. I was curious because, like, sometimes you see two wrestlers go against each other and all they do is stand up and fight. Like Colby versus Usman, just a stand-up war. Recently, like Hamzat versus Gilbert Burns. I know Gilbert Burns isn't the wrestler. He's a jiu-jitsu guy, but, like, still, those are two high-level ground guys. And they stood up and fought the majority of the fight. So I was curious, how's this fight going to go out? And they stood up and fought for a little bit. But then Andre was able to get the submission relatively early in the fight. So he had a big win. He's now 3-0 in the UFC. He had a call out against GM3, Gerald Meerschaert. And I actually like that matchup. I think Gerald's still in the rankings, so I'm not sure that's something that he'd want to make. But Andre Petroski, he's a very fun fighter to watch. I'm curious to see how things progress with his career. And then moving on from MMA, I want to talk about the New York Jets schedule that has been officially released. I kind of touched on the Ravens game the other day. Ravens week 1 in New York. I think this is even on 9/11, I want to say. But that's a super tough game to start off your season if you're the Jets. And then it gets harder as well because game two, depending on how things play out, the Cleveland Browns are a very good team. And if Deshaun Watson is somehow playing week one and week two, then like they're playing potentially like a playoff team that could go deep in the playoffs. I'd feel a lot more confident if Deshaun Watson got suspended. Obviously, I don't even know how all that's gonna go. And I don't say that to say I'm like rooting for him to be suspended. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just looking at this from a Jets fan perspective. Is if he's not playing, then the Jets have a much better chance to win that football game. And then we come back home and play the Bengals week 3. I mean, the Bengals just went to the Super Bowl and then they revamped their entire offensive line. Like they're going to be a tough team to beat. And then the Steelers, I think they have a tough defense, but like they're ultimately going to have Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, or a rookie quarterback behind center and Kenny Pickett. So like that out of the first 4 games, I'd say I'm most confident that we could get a win there. But also like the Steelers are a good football team, and for the Jets, we're going to get tested right off the bat. And it's the NFL, and like we eventually like we have to hold the team accountable, and we have to have some sort of expectations for the New York Jets. And it's like I wish we could play the Jags and the Lions in week 1 and 2, so we could start off with easier games. But that's not how the NFL works, and ultimately like you're still going to have to win X amount of games towards the end of the season to make the playoffs and to move further. So if you start, 2-2 or 1-3, like that's going to be tough. But it's not something that can't be overcame, especially with a 17-game season. And then week 5, we play the Dolphins. I'm hoping that this year with the Dolphins, we can at least split the series. The Dolphins made a ton of improvements as well in the offseason, but it's going to be another thing, like just how good is Tua? Is Tua able to take that next step, or are we going to see a lot more of what we've seen in the past? And if that's the case and Tua's not able to kind of get the most out of Tyreek Hill and the new running backs and everything they have, then there's a good chance that the Jets could take those games. And then week 6, another super difficult game in Green Bay against the Packers. That's going to be tough, playing one of the best quarterbacks of all time. But also, like, there's few things to look forward to in all these games because the Jets have really overall improved the offense and defense. And like the Packers, for example, they haven't really done too much at the receiver position. Like, I'm not too scared of any receiver currently on the Packers. So we'll see how that goes. And then from the Packers, we go to Denver. We play the Broncos. Obviously we'll have to see how the first few games go for them, but they're in prime position to look really good. I know Russell Wilson's one of the best QBs in football, and then, I think Jerry Jeudy has having some trouble with the law. I'm curious to see like how serious is that. I'm pretty sure he's probably still going to play and everything, so we'll see if anything factors into that. And then week 8 we play the Patriots. The Patriots aren't the Patriots that they used to be, but we still got murdered by them last year. So that one I'm like a little iffy on. I don't know if they're going to just murder us or are we going to make that next step and compete with them this year. And then week 9 we play the Buffalo Bills, another very tough division rival, a team that could potentially go all the way this year. They're a very good football team and they've made a lot of good moves this offseason. And then we get the bye week, and then we play the Patriots again in New England. So I'm hoping that, again, like, I'll say that with Miami, and I'll say it with the Patriots. Please just go 1-1. If we could win 1, lose 1, that's cool. I just don't want to get shut out again in the division like we have in the last few years. And then we play Chicago week 12. That's actually a very good matchup. I like some pieces Chicago has. I really like Justin Fields. I just don't think that Chicago has done a whole lot to put weapons around him. And not only that, like the offensive line they have over there isn't the best either. So I like that matchup. And then we go to Minnesota for week 13. And I think that's a decent matchup too. Like, Minnesota is one of those teams that's probably going to hover around the 500 mark, maybe get a couple games above it. So we'll see how that goes. That should be a fun game. And then week 14 we go into Buffalo and we play the Bills. I mean, I would love to beat the Bills a game this year. Like last year, the Bills lost to the Jags. So truly anything is possible in football. But also, if I had to like pick a team that I don't expect us to beat this year in division specifically, I don't expect us to beat the Bills. I'd love for it to happen. I just, expectation wise, being a Jets fan, like I have to have reasonable expectations, you know. And then week 15 we play the Lions, so I'm stoked for this one because the Lions I think are a perfect matchup for the Jets. I think the Jets can win this game, and then week 16 we play the Jags. So a couple games in a row that we have a good chance to win in. Obviously, like when you get to week 15, week 16, who knows what the health of your team looks like and all that stuff and where you are with the rest of the season. So, some of those things might play a factor. So hopefully this year we can have some health because I think, I don't want to say that we're going to go to the playoffs. I think that would be talking a little bit too soon. But if we're looking at like a 7-9, 7-10 game, like winning season, and by that I mean like we win between 7 and 10 games, I think that's reasonable. And I also think that's a very good improvement from what we had last year. And if we do that, then we definitely have had an improvement out of our quarterback, Zach Wilson, in year 2. And then the final 2 games of the year, we play in Seattle against the Seahawks. I always want to see that game because I want to burn it in even more about the Jamal Adams trade. Like, now the Seattle Seahawks don't have Russ, so I don't see them being a playoff contender or anything like they would have been had they had Russ. And I mean, obviously they weren't last year, but people typically talk about them as a playoff team when they had Russ. So they've got a worse team, and now we have finally made all the draft picks that we got for Jamal Adams. So like we got a chance for Garrett Wilson to put up a touchdown on Jamal Adams, and I think that would be amazing. Like I'm still salty about it. Like when Jamal Adams was on the Jets, he was one of my favorite players. And then just the way that he left the Jets, I hated it. And then week 18 we play the Dolphins, in Miami. So that game could potentially have some outcomes tied to it because even last year I think the Dolphins were in the run for the playoffs. So we'll see how the rest of the AFC East shapes up. I'm very excited for this upcoming season. Now that the schedule is released, we have like a long time before more football stuff happens. Obviously, like if a trade or a big free agency signing happens, we'll cover it on the channel. But until then, we're probably just gonna be covering other sports and then, maybe doing some other things here for football, prepping for fantasy football season and all that good stuff. But that kind of wraps up the video of everything I wanted to touch on today. If you like and enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. It means a lot, and thank you for tuning in.